Welcome, everybody, to Midday Magazine for this Friday, January 17th, 2025. Have your host, James J. Maloff here. In part two at 4:30, we're going to talk with our friends from the Port Edwards Lions Club about their fishery coming up on the 25th. Looking forward to talking to Jim and Dave in just a little bit. Right now, we have joining us on the phone line, Wisconsin State Senator Patrick Testin joining us. Always good to talk with you, sir. How have you been?
I'm doing great, James. It's been a busy first couple of weeks here in the new session, and we're off to a fast start and looking forward to getting a lot of work done over the course of these next 2 years.
Entering your third term as a state senator, congratulations on that. How was inauguration?
It was great. It's always an exciting day, and as I often tell people, I got the chills when I walked in on inauguration day of the Capitol, and I think that's a good sign because the day that comes, that doesn't occur. That's going to be the high sign from up above that it's time to move on and let someone else take the reins. But it's a really great occasion because it's one of these moments where no one's butting heads. Everyone's excited to start a new session with so many new representatives in both the state assembly and as well as the state senate. There's a lot of new members, and with that comes new ideas, new perspectives. And so I've already had the opportunity. I was down in Milwaukee last week and had a chance to sit down and grab dinner with one of my new Democratic colleagues in the state Senate, Senator Dora Drake, who is she's one of the younger members. She's roughly my age. And we had a really great conversation over dinner about just some of the challenges that her district is facing. And I shared some of the challenges that we're facing. And I'm really hopeful that by having dialogues like that, we can bridge the political divide and come together and really focus on solutions for our prospective districts.
Senator, a question that I ask a lot of my students and a lot of friends in different industries, and one I was curious about for you. You've been doing this for a while now. What have you learned going into your third Senate run?
It's one of the biggest things I've learned, and is that, we all have, I think all of our hearts are in the right place. Everyone's there to serve. And, regardless of your political ideology, whether you're a Republican, Democrat, or liberal, or conservative, somewhere in the middle, I think by and large, everyone that's there is there for the exact same reasons, that they want to make sure that our country, our state, and our communities are great places to live, work, and raise a family. It's just sometimes we have different approaches of how we get there. And so, my hope is, as it's been in previous sessions, is that I anticipate the vast majority of the bills that get signed into law over the course of these next 2 years are going to be bipartisan. And I think the biggest takeaway is that, when we do have heated and contentious moments on the floor where we're very far apart on that, regardless of how things shake out, that we can move past that and realize that even though we may be on opposing ends one day, that there may be issues down the road where we find ourselves in agreement. And I think the more that we can take the politics of personality and not take things personal, I think that in the long run is going to result in better public policy coming forth within both bodies of the legislature.
What would you say, because certainly you're going to have the things that your passions, and there are certainly going to be things that come up in the year that we didn't see coming or maybe planned for, but what would you say are your key focuses going into this year and going into your term?
I think a couple of the key areas that I'm really going to focus on, so as the co-vice chair of the Joint Finance Committee, I'll be in the room alongside my fellow co-vice chair and Representative Tony Kurtz, along with the co-chairs of the Finance Committee, Mark Boren and Senator Howard Markline, throughout this budget. We are going to be the ones in the room really negotiating, along with leadership in both houses, including the Speaker as well as the Senate Majority Leader. And I think by and large, many of us are in agreement that we want to continue to push and pursue significant tax relief. People I talk to all across the district are still dealing with high prices, and dollars don't stretch as far as they did 4, 5, 6 years ago. And so providing an increase or a tax cut is going to be a priority. And then my role as the Senate Vice Chair of the Senate Committee on Health is going to continue to focus on areas on how we can reduce costs in healthcare increase access in underserved areas. And for me, that in large part goes hand in hand with really empowering our healthcare providers to operate at the highest level of the scope of practice. You take a look at what we did last session that finally got signed into law, the Rural Dentistry Scholarship Program through the Marquette School of Dentistry. That's going to help students in the dentistry program to go practice in underserved and rural areas. Well, I think we can apply that same approach to other areas in healthcare. And so we're already sitting down with stakeholders on issues like that to examine ideas to provide better care. And then lastly, it continues to be workforce, making sure that we're doing what we can to, whether it's things like the Fast Forward grant program, continue to fund that, which school districts have until roughly mid-February to apply, where they can get anywhere to $5,000 to $100,000 grants to help vocational training, programming, equipment, to really help train up our future workforce here in the state and ensure that our employers are building a pipeline for next generation that we need.
One of the unique things I think about that, too, is the incentives for these individuals when they finish their education to stay in state and continue working here.
Well, exactly, and that is the key. And so, what's really encouraging is that the UW system of tech colleges, they retain the vast majority of their graduates. However, there's still about 15 to 20% that come from the state of Wisconsin or come outside the state, and they get a great education, and then they leave. So anything that we can do to try and capture that, even though it may not seem like a big number, but when you take a look at our employers, not just here in central Wisconsin, but around the state, this has been an ongoing problem for nearly a decade. And some of it's demographics. Others is just we need to encourage more participation in the workforce, because when you have jobs that just even, 7-8 years ago that were paying minimum wage are now paying upwards of $15, $16, $17 to even $20 an hour, it shows you that there is a real struggle out there for employers to find good qualified workers. And oftentimes, as I often tell high school students and middle school students, is a gold mine of opportunity out there for you. If you even do the bare minimum, like show up on time, be able to look and have a conversation with someone in their eyes and not be glued to your phone, you're already leaps and bounds ahead of some of your peers. And just to really encourage that. And so, there's work to be done, but as always, I am ever optimistic that we can tackle these challenges and walk and chew gum at the same time and hopefully keep moving our state in the right direction.
We certainly, and I don't think that I mean no crass by this, but we certainly have some unpredictability whenever we have a changing of the guard, if you will, when you have a new president coming in. And we have all heard the conversations about deportation and some of the immigration talk. And we've also heard from a lot of our ag industry about how that could affect our ag industry and our workers here, our farmers and some of that. When we talk about, creating more jobs or creating more education in jobs, is this something that's being talked about with you and your colleagues? Is this something you guys are thinking of and wanting to maybe, I don't want to say get ahead of, because again, you can't, we don't know what's going to happen yet, but is this a conversation you're having behind the scenes in that?
There are some conversations being had. This session, I have the privilege to serve as the Agricultural and Revenue Committee Chair in the State Senate. And so making sure that our ag economy remains vibrant is going to be, again, one of my top priorities this session. And so we've had some really good conversations with folks from organizations like the Farm Bureau, the Wisconsin Potato and Vegetable Growers Association. And, there is some concern of what could or may happen. But, I think by and large, at least from what I've seen and what I've heard, is that, the emphasis is going to be making sure that those who are here illegally and have committed criminal acts are probably going to get deported. But I think more importantly is, from what we've been hearing, is that there's going to be a push to make sure that we have a pathway for legal citizenship. That I don't think it's any secret that at the federal level, our immigration process, it's broken. And my hope is that Congress can work with the President Trump's administration to address some of these issues, but do it in a manner that's not going to disrupt some of our dairy farmers, because, dairy farmers don't have the luxury of only being able to go out and milk for a few months a year, while the rest, we're dealing with snow and cold. They have to go out there and milk their cows 365, 24 hours a day.
Well, it's a great point, and that's the kind of point that we need made for them, and that's the job, right? Representing those being the voice for those industries in your state, and to that point, sir, I want to get into the Senate passing the voter ID resolution with you, and just to catch everybody up that have not known too much about this, or if maybe haven't heard the details or just read headlines. Assembly Republicans voted Tuesday to advance a proposal that would enshrine Wisconsin's existing voter identification law into the state constitution. And the resolution is to set up the statewide referendum was approved in both houses of the legislature along party lines. Now, this is something that by now, with the 24-hour news cycle and everything, most of the talking points have been made by both sides of the party, including yourself. Now, I will give you time to talk about this particular part of it if you would like. But what I would like to do is go to where when I wanted to prep for this interview, and I would say going back to last Friday or Saturday, but even before this resolution was passed, I was asking my friends, my family members, just different listeners I could talk to, getting a blind survey, if you will, or a poor man survey, if you will, of how important this was to them. And while I didn't hear this as a top priority. What I did hear is why is this the question of why this is such a top priority? Why is this the first thing getting done in the new year? When you could make the argument, and I don't think it's a hard one to make, that we've got a lot bigger issues in accessing healthcare workforce, childcare. We got to keep going. There's so many things that it feels like the focus and you and your colleagues should be on this when it seems like it's this. Why is it the focus? Why is it your first focus, or not yours in particular, but the Congress and everything?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked. So on Wednesday, so our third day on the job for this new session, the Senate came in and we passed Senate Joint Resolution 2, which was a question, basically a constitutional amendment. So here in the state of Wisconsin, we have a process by which constitutional amendments get proposed and then approved. So a resolution has to pass two consecutive legislatures by both houses, the state Senate as well as the state Assembly. So last session, it was up for first consideration to enshrine voter ID into our state constitution. And the reason why this was brought up is because we face right now, regardless of where people stand, a court that is acting like a super legislature. They are legislating from the bench. We suspect that it's only a matter of time, if we had not done this, that there would be a lawsuit that would challenge the constitutionality of our voter ID law, which has been on the books since 2011. And while I agree there are lots of other issues that need to be addressed, and I assure you, James, they are going to be addressed, but this was the only thing that we had ready to go in the hopper for Wednesday because it had already passed a previous legislature through both houses. It just had to be simply introduced again. Thankfully, our Judiciary Committee, they met on Tuesday to take public testimony and then exec it out of committee, so it was ready for the floor. And so this is now going to be on everyone's ballot for the April election, where you are going to have local elections as well as for Department of Public Instruction and as well as Supreme Court. And so if this gets enshrined and approved, voter ID, which again has been on state books since 2011, will be enshrined in our state constitution, which is an issue that I think overwhelmingly many people support. And just making sure that when you go to the polls, that you identify who you are, and that's verified. No different than when, with so many other things that we do in life where you have to prove identification of who you are, whether it's going to a restaurant to have a old-fashioned with your fish fry on a Friday or buying a six-pack of Oso beer to you name it. Buying medications over the counter, even spray paint, you got to show voter or show an ID. So I think this is pretty common practice, and in fact, it was referenced on the floor that, in previous elections in the lead up to the November election, that even individuals like Governor Evers had posted on social media sites such as X that voting is very easy. Go get your free ID from the DMV. And so I'm in agreement with that. And so I was happy to support that. And if people have questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. But just be aware, this will be on your ballot on the April election.
And I think you noted something that's important. While, again, in the 24-hour news cycle, it feels like these topics just come up. This has been going on since 2011. This has been something that has been in the conversation for quite some time now. And I do think that you can look at this in a number of different angles, no matter where you're coming from this on, and see some positives to this for both sides, for both parties, for what's most important, people. I'm not talking about parties. I'm just talking about people. And you need an ID in life. You do. And this could help some people actually doing that and getting that. And we also certainly all want fair elections. There's nobody who's fighting differently on that. Even as a Chicagoan, I will say that I want fair elections. I'm going to go out of, but I do want, there is another part of this too. And I'm curious how you answer when your constituents or when people ask you some of the things that I started off with, or what the need of this is, that we haven't really had a ton of issues with this in Wisconsin when it comes to voter fraud or some of these things. How do you answer that? How do you answer the idea that there are people that worry that this law can make it harder for some people to vote? And I'm not talking about making it harder for illegal people to vote. That is obviously is wrong. I hope I took care of that already. But people that it's hard for them to vote that are already American citizens. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, so I mean, my response to that is you just have to take a look at the voting trends here in the state. So just a few months ago, we had one of the highest voter turnouts in state history. In fact, in even places like the city of Milwaukee, 85% of the registered voters showed up to vote. And, you know, that was one of the arguments that we heard from some of my colleagues who represent the city of Milwaukee, that this is going to suppress the minority vote, which clearly that's not the case, because 85% of the city of Milwaukee, they showed up to the polls. And when you take a look, too, and we heard that this might even impact rural areas where people don't have the ability. There are townships, James, here in central Wisconsin, places like the town of Rome, where over 95% of registered voters had voted early in the November election. And to put this in perspective, to vote early absentee, if you do it by mail, not only do you have to have a photo ID, you have to submit and send in a printed copy of your ID to cast your ballot. So, we have set up a process. Now, granted, I wasn't in the legislature when voter ID was initially enacted, but they set up a pathway at that time for people if they need to get a government-issued ID. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. It is free to you to go to the DMV and sign up, get your voter ID. So it's not that difficult. And, I would also argue that there is some sense of responsibility. We all know, or at least we all should know, because I hear from everyone during the height of campaign season that everyone is sick and tired of the phone calls, the texts, the commercials, the radio ads, the mailers, the social media posts. Everyone gets bombarded. We know when elections are coming. So if people are really serious about voting, it is not that difficult to take some semblance of responsibility to go through the process to make sure that you have the right documentation, a voter ID, and then from there, voting is a breeze. We have same-day voter registration. It is very easy to do, and again, it's been highlighted by folks on both sides of the aisle in the lead up to any major election that voting, it's an easy, we lay out the process, lay out information, provide resources to people. And so for me, from my standpoint, this law has been on the books for nearly 15 years now. I don't know of too many people who have ever had an issue. In fact, it's been well documented now that statewide, the number of people who have run into not being able to cast their ballot, it is a statistical anomaly as far as how few it has occurred.
Well, and I think that on another silver lining of this, too, one way or the other, this could also help us see maybe some issues for voters that we didn't even know, or maybe how we can help people be able to vote more, make it more accessible. I think there's a lot of other things that can come from this, too. So there's plenty to talk about here, and I'm sure we will continue to talk about it in future conversations. With the last minute or so we have left, sir, I wanted to ask you, have any On the Job series events coming up?
Well, I was actually supposed to have one on Monday. I was going to be working with Ellis Construction based here in Stevens Point, and we were going to be on the job site over in the mall. However, and I didn't lose a lot because of how cold it was on we had to reschedule. So they didn't allow their workers to go out on the site that day. So we're actually trying to move up the job series that's going to be held at the Strike Zone, the bowling alley in Toma. So we're trying to see if we could be moved up for January and maybe knock it in.
Okay. You're breaking up quite a bit on us here, sir. Sorry about that, but we are wrapping up anyway. So real quick, we're looking forward to hearing about the On the Job series. Going to a bowling alley sounds like a lot of fun. I hope you're able to move that up a little bit. If people have follow-up questions, want to reach you, how can they reach you?
If I don't want to get a hold of me, reach out to my office. Our number is 608-266-3123. Drop us an email at my last name, Testin, at legis.wi.gov. Follow us on social media. And as always, if you see me out and about, feel free to stop me, pull me aside. And like I tell everyone, if you need to meet with me, I'm like an old school doctor. I make house calls.
We caught a break there. That was completely clear. All of that was heard. That was great. That was awesome. Always good talking with you, sir. Have a great weekend. Safe travels out there. We'll talk again next month.
I appreciate it, James.
Wisconsin State Senator Petra Testin joining us. Appreciate the time from him as always. We got a great conversation coming up for you right here on Midday Magazine at 97.5 FM, 1320 AM, WFHR. We are locally grown radio.